Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have a special guest with us. Her name is Carrie Casey West. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and narrative coach. She helps people rewrite their internal stories that shape their lives, especially when those stories are rooted in pain, loss, or old identities that no longer serve them. Carrie's background in filmmaking, psychology, and story analysis has shown her that storytelling isn't just creative, it's deeply healing. Her book, Life Rewritten, was born out of her belief that we all have the power to reshape our narrative and step into a more meaningful and purpose-driven life. And I could not agree more with that statement about her book. And so, without further ado, Carrie, welcome to the podcast.
Yay! Thanks, Chris. I've been so looking forward to this. I enjoyed when we spoke before, and so this just makes it all the more special.
Well, likewise, I'm really glad we get to be on the podcast today. And I love, first off, that you're focused on storytelling because I know going through grief and especially in the coaching industry that you and I are in, stories play a big part of our role in how we shape our identity, how we think about ourselves or feel about ourselves. And when we go through moments of grief or loss or even trauma for that matter, there's always a story at play there. But there's also another way for us to rewrite our stories that can empower us to go create that next phase of life. And so I'm excited for you to share a little bit about your story and also dive into that a little deeper as we get into the episode today.
Excellent, excellent. So, you want me to start?
Yeah, I'd love for you to share your story with us. I know you said you moved from one place in California to another, and I know you had lived in one area for a very long time, so everything was very accustomed and very routine, and you're used to that. And then you moved to a whole different place that had to basically relearn where everything was at, and it caused you to go a little deeper in your life.
Well, I, I would say that I'm the kind of person that's always seeking. I always seek. I always want to learn. I always want to figure out more about this complex thing we call life. Um, and I suspect it might be a lot easier than what I'm making it, but that's a different story. So we won't go there on this call. Um, I started off with a pretty difficult beginning. I was rejected by my mother and father, and even though they didn't send me on my way or put me up for adoption, it was probably worse because I was pretty much left on to my own devices as a baby even. They didn't feed me that often, rarely changed my diaper, so it wasn't a really great beginning, and I suffered a lot of trauma. I didn't even realize till my 20s that I had been traumatized, which happens to a lot of us. We don't know that we're dealing with trauma in a lot of cases. But what happened was I started to develop a different when I went on my healing journey. I started to develop a whole new sense of what that experience did for me. And the craziest thing happened as I was healing and making changes. I was overcome by this great sadness. And you would think somebody making really great positive changes after that horrible beginning would just be ecstatic and joyful. And here I was sad. And what I came to realize was even though it wasn't a great life, it was my life. Good, bad, or indifferent, it was my life. And for a couple of years, I didn't even realize it was a bad life. It's what I knew. And I see I'm starting to freeze up here. I hope you can still hear me.
Oh yeah, you're still alive. You're good.
Okay. So what I realized was that sadness was the grief. That even though it wasn't great, it was mine. And I started to understand if you're making changes in your life, grief is a big part of, like you said, accepting it, accepting and embracing the new changes or the new life you face yourself in. So we tend to look at grief as only being around the loss of an individual, a loss of someone we love, loss of a pet. But grief is everywhere. Anytime you make a change in your life, there is grief. Because good, bad, or indifferent, what you're giving up was yours. And an acknowledgement of that role that that part played for you. Because honestly, for again, my horrible beginning, it made me who I am. It taught me how determined I am and how resourceful I am and how smart I am. Yes, I missed a childhood. I did not get to have a childhood. I didn't have birthday parties and a lot of friends that came over for sleepovers. I never did a sleepover till I was like 28 years old, I think. But it was still my life and it got me here. It got me here. So that in a nutshell is why I'm so excited about your topic around grief because we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to acknowledge how grief is an important part of our lives. It's a chance for us to say thank you or thank God I'm done with it. It's a way to say goodbye.
It really is because, when I grew up with grief, and I think it's a generational thing in many ways, but grief was one of those things of like, get over it and move on and let go. And those things are still very prevalent today in society. But after recording 100 podcast episodes, talking to that many people for an hour, I have come to learn that we're emotional beings as humans, and we don't always get over it and let go of things as easy as society tells us to do it. And so, when
Yeah.
we do that, by the way, we miss an opportunity not just to reflect on our life and maybe say, well, this actually did help me become the person I am today, or there was something I could have done better in that moment. We miss an opportunity for growth within ourselves when we ignore grief. And so I call grief a personal
Yeah.
transformation from who you were while you step into who you're becoming. And it's that chasm in between there, by the way,
Yes.
that causes us to deeply reflect on ourselves if we give ourselves the opportunity. And there's so many, what I like to call hidden gifts, lessons, and blessings within that. And maybe for, people with your story, it's going to be, thank God I survived my childhood. Thank God I've become a person of my life today. And as you said, by the way, this is my story. It's my life. Whether I like it or not, I have to accept it. And I just think that was powerful, what you said.
Yeah. No, it is empowering. It is empowering when you can when I think so many times we have this victim mentality, this mentality of it happened to me. And I think that that's a disservice.
I couldn't agree more with you about that. I do think that when we are in grief, by the way, it's very easy for us to fall into that victim mindset in a lot of ways, because we may not always have supportive people that listen to us or supportive people that are there to, talk things out or just give us space, hold space for us. And so, on top of that, we're dealing with, not just the loss of a family member or a pet, but maybe that's a job. Maybe that's like your situation, moving from one city to another, or maybe one house to another. If you lived in one place for 30 years and you're in a whole new environment, trying to understand where things are and how things work and how that impacts your day to day. Grief is everywhere, like you said. And so, it doesn't mean, by the way, that we have to look at grief as this very sad, negative, depressing thing. We don't have to always look at it that in the lens. And that's kind of where we get out of that victim state of this happened to me, and we step into that place of saying this happened for me. And when we can
Yeah.
step in that place, I think I just see so much opportunity for people to say that, yes, what I went through was not fun. And yes, it was not easy on me. And yes, it was incredibly difficult. And it's something I never thought I'd see myself working through, but I'm still
Mm.
here today. I'm still standing, and I'm out doing. I like to use my podcast guests, for example. I talk to a lot of people that have become coaches or authors or speakers or have created impact in the world in so many ways, but had they not gone through that grief process and acknowledged it and got out of that victim mindset, they would never become the great
Absolutely.
people that they are today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why I'm so excited to be on this podcast because it's such an important step to acknowledge the life we have and the life we've had and the things that have meant something to us. And like you said, we have to acknowledge that what makes us human, what a great part of our humanity is this emotional connection that we make to each other and to our lives and to even things. I'm sorry. I'm gonna say it. Moving out of a house that becomes a home that you put so much energy and time into it. Yeah, it's a thing in theory, but it's become a safe haven and it's become a place of joy when you have friends over. It's a place of safety. So when you change homes, I think I told you about a client that was moving and was just so distraught, and I said, go into each room and film it and film the story of something in that room that meant something to you. And then you can look back on it. Because the truth is, we never lose our memories. We never lose contact with these things that have happened with us. Yes, I'm beyond this childhood that wasn't great, but it's still with me. It's still a part of me. So make peace with it. And grief is a good way to make peace with these things. And the same with things that we love and cherish. They don't go away. They're still a piece of us. They're still in us. They're still in our hearts. So welcome them. Don't ignore them and oh, I don't want to look at that. Oh. Welcome them. Embrace them. It helps tremendously. Because the truth is, when you lose a loved one, you never fill up that space. I don't care what anyone says. I've lost a lot of loved ones. A dear, 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 dear friend of mine died 2.5 years ago, and I still think of her. And there will never be somebody like her in my life ever again. And I acknowledge that. She was that special of a person. She had tremendous impact on me. My grieving her acknowledges the impact she had on me. But I also know that space in my heart is reserved for Sue, and no one's going to fill it because I'll never meet another Sue. I might meet somebody else like her, but it won't be her. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense because I feel the same way about losses I've had in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are things we do to mitigate and enhance our lives so we aren't in this daily morose feeling of missing someone or something. But that doesn't make it any less impactful.
Well, I think that's where some people that go through grief, miss that opportunity. And that's why I always bring up that you'll get told to move on and let it go. But what I like to phrase it as is remember and honor and have a legacy with that person you lost or that house like I had. I spent 5 years working on a house and had to sell it. And you're normally gonna have emotions. You're a human. We're emotional beings. I've not met somebody that's been completely emotionally detached from losing a loved one or losing a house for that matter. And to say that we honor and remember and celebrate these people, I think is such a beautiful thing. I honor my grandfather every day. I honor my son every day with what I do. And I always tell people, like you said, those hard feelings you have of that loss, they're never gone. You can always go visit them. They're always there. But I can tell you that they may be looking down on you saying, I don't want you to live your life in a sad doom and gloom. I want you to go live life and be happy. I want that for you. And so
Yeah,
if you can find ways to celebrate and honor those that you lose or honor that house that gave you whatever it may be, whether that was financial or gave you an aspect of life with family, honor those things and celebrate them. And that grief will move you through that and give you such a beautiful gift.
absolutely. And I find when I have a course now called Money Rewritten where I help people move through their money stories. And Chris, it is one of the most difficult things for people to do. We have such an attachment to what I'll call the money origin story, what we first learned about money. And when you start changing that, you almost feel like I had one client say to me, I feel like I'm what's the word? I'm disrespecting. It's not disrespecting. I can't remember the word he used completely, but it was like I was given this story. It served me for so long. Now I feel like I'm just pushing it to the side of the road and saying, I'm done with you. Get out of here. I said, well, honor that story. You don't have to just, but it's so funny how when it comes to money, we have such an attachment to these old stories. And when you finally find a way through that, you almost feel like you're like I said, disrespecting, but you're just um, not honoring this original story you were given about money. And it's why we hold on to some things for so long. It's why we stay stuck because we don't want to feel the emotions of what it means to say, I've made a different choice. I'm giving up that old story. Even if your great grandfather, who you love dearly, told you that money is evil and you should never have any, and if you want to change that story, you feel like you're not honoring this person that you loved and cherished. So you don't want to do that. You want to hold on to it as a way to say, I love this man or I love this person and they taught me that story. I have to do it. I have to stay connected to that story.
Yeah, that's you're reminding me of something I share with coaching clients all the time that shocks people when I make this statement, but it's a very powerful one. As I will tell people in certain moments when it's appropriate, I'll say, you are more comfortable managing the chaos in front of you than stepping into the unknown that will actually make you happy. And I'll get a lot of pushback sometimes. I'll say, well, how can you say that? Or how? I said, are you happy at your job? Do you love going to work every day? Like you get up out of bed and you're like, I'm going to work today. It's going to be a great day. 90% of you, that's a no. You roll out of bed and go, ugh, why do I got to do this again? And
Yeah,
same thing when you go through grief, same thing. Why did this have to happen to me? Why am I going
yeah,
through this? But when you give yourself
absolutely.
that place to step in the unknown, yes, it's very uncomfortable and it's very uncertain. But sometimes you give yourself that opportunity to rewrite that story, just like you
Yep,
talked about in your bio. And that's
yep.
where all of a sudden there's a switch that happens over there in the uncertainty that goes, oh, I can let that go a little bit. Or when I do let it go, I'm giving it new purpose, new meaning to my life. And now it's pushing me forward and not holding me back.
Well, I want you to know I'm now going to call on you because you and I have a similar thing when I'm working with somebody and they go, well, this just doesn't work. Your stuff, it doesn't work. I've tried everything you've said and it doesn't work. And I'll say, so why does the old story mean more to you than the new one? It
Ooh.
does not. How can you say that? I've been working hard to change that story. It just doesn't work. Okay.
Yep.
So,
Well, because we want change in an instant nowadays. That's the whole problem with these things is, change for me. After losing my son, I'm still 2.5, 3 years deep in that, and I'm still seeing change come out. So,
yeah.
uh,
Oh, but okay, got a secret for you. These big, giant, changing things don't happen. They do, but they're the rare ones. Change happens in a moment. I call them micro moments of change. The lasting change happens in a moment. You're going down your path, and then you have something come up that's the same old, same old. And in that moment, you stop and say, I think I'm going to make a different choice. So you start going off that way. And it might seem like nothing, but over time it spreads and it becomes this wide change that completely shifts your whole life. And when you do little changes like that, your brain starts to comply because your brain likes consistency. Your brain wants things to happen all the time. I think our comfort zones are more because our brain forces that issue. Our brains are reluctant to change. We know the path. It may not be a great one, but we know it. We're going to stick with it. So when you make these tiny micro moments of change, those are the lasting ones. And those help
yeah.
you rewire your brain for more changes.
I love that you said that because when I get resistance from people saying I don't like change or I'm never going to change, I love people like that because I always ask them the following questions. Have you ever bought a new car in 3 to 5 years? Have you bought a new cell phone in the last 12 months? Did you change where you lived in the last 5 to 7 years? And they always look at me and go, well, yeah, I've done that. And I said, that was change, wasn't
Change.
it?
That was change.
Maybe you chose to shop at a different grocery store last week, or you had to go to a different gas station, or you had to take a different route because the freeway had an accident, right? So change happens every
Yep.
day. You just don't see it and acknowledge it. And that what you talked about though is what I love is saying those micro changes. When we actually focus on that for once and say, oh, I made a small change today. I went and did something different, or I thought about this differently, or I gave myself permission to go left instead of right. When we
Yeah.
actually acknowledge it, it breaks that pattern, and then we actually establish a new pattern that's very
I
helpful for us.
I even, they have these techniques to get people out of their heads, like they say instead of write with your right hand, write with your left hand. And um, how do you get out of your head? And I always tell people, if you're so afraid of change, this is what I want you to do. If you go to work, if you don't work from home, I want you to take another route to work, drive another route. If you typically stop for coffee, I want you to either get tea or not stop for coffee. If you have to have your Starbucks at noon every day or at 11 o'clock every day, don't. Just for today, do something else at 11 o'clock. So I invite them to start seeing what change is and how it affects them. And here's my favorite one. And this one always has great, 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 great impact. I tell them to find a new restaurant to go to. Because
Mm.
do you realize most people only have, and I'm in Santa Barbara and we don't have such a wide array of restaurants. But even when I lived in LA, where you have thousands of restaurants to choose from, I only went to about five or six all the time.
Yep.
And I had my favorites, and those are the ones I went to. And sometimes when I'd meet somebody new and they'd say, "Oh, you got to go to this great restaurant," I would be like, "Oh, no, I'm not going over there." But I tell people, go to a new restaurant, pick a new one. Even if you don't think you're going to like it, get over yourself, go to the new restaurant.
Yeah,
And
it's
nine
breaking
times
that
out of
pattern.
10, they love it.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that because we all get stuck in that pattern of comfort. And that's what I think that when we go through grief and loss in particular, we're looking for comfort. We're not looking for that new, unknown, uncertain. We haven't experienced it yet. And I love that you said a restaurant, by the way, because we can all relate to that. We can all, you could ask any person walking the street within a block that you don't even know, a complete stranger, and say, "Where would you go get breakfast today?" And they go, "This place." Or if you said lunch, they go, that place over there. They'll say it so quick off the top of their head, they don't even have to think about it.
Yep. Yep. Now we are creatures of habit. And
Yeah,
that is
and that
because our brain likes coherence and sameness.
it does, but it also creates, issues for us when we go through grief processes
Yes.
because
Yes.
that comfort that we're used to is no longer there. And
That's
so
right.
now it becomes the question of we didn't get an opportunity to pick if we want to be uncomfortable or not. We were forced and thrown into it.
Yep.
And so then
Yep.
it's a matter of rewiring that comfort, so to speak, rewiring what that's going to be. And that's where we say we're uncomfortable with change. We got chucked into it. Now we don't have a choice. And then on top of
Yeah.
that, we have to figure it out. We don't have a choice. And that's a very messy process for many people. But like you just said, if we take those opportunities to pick a new restaurant, drive a new thing to work, to just really small things that may not really, be massive impact changes right away, but just very small change like you were talking about.
But
Give
it but
us
it
that.
all it still has that unknown. It still has that
Mhm.
fear of the unknown. No matter it's like crazy. If I tell you not to go to Starbucks at 11 a.m., well, what do I do? Where do I go? I have to leave the house at 11 a.m. Okay, well go drive around the neighborhood. Go for a walk. But you
Yeah.
know, but that is scary. And you're right. You're right. I want you to know. My dad, I lost both my parents when I was in my early 20s. Dad died 20 minutes suddenly, had a heart attack, no idea, gone. Mom had cancer and lingered. In both cases, it was still grief. It was still a shock that I lost him, even though with mom, and the first time you lose a parent, at least for me, I stopped saying if my mom or dad die. I started saying when mom dies after dad died. And by the way, I took some grief from my cousins and my aunts who said, "Don't say that they died. Say that they left us." Okay, they left us. So, we have these rituals and these feelings around how we respond to these situations in our life. But when mom left us, it was still, even though I had more time to think about it and prepare, there was still the grief, the loss. And I equate that to I'm a Star Trek fan. And I equate that to my dear Mr. Data, who I love completely in Star Trek Next Generation. And they've tried to talk to Data about being human. And as an android, how do you deal with losing somebody? And he said it so perfectly, and it's exactly. He said, "Well, I think about the fact that I made space in my positronic brain to have that person in my life. And when they're gone, I still have that space, but nothing to fill it. So I do notice a difference when somebody who would be a friend, not that friendship is the same, but Data would call them a friend because he wants to be more human. I notice that they're no longer in the space that I set aside for them in my brain, in my positronic programming.
Mhm. So
And
that's an interesting perspective.
isn't it though? And I just thought, yeah, there's something about that, that
So,
recognizing that there's that space, and what do you do with it?
yeah, what did you do in that moment when you lost your parents and you had that space there? How did you work through that?
Well, it was interesting. It probably took me about 10 years to grieve either one of them because there was so much emotion and anger for, like I said, this was the start of my healing journey to see what a terrible life they had sprung on me. And so it took me about 10 years to even get to a place where I could acknowledge and forgive them, and then I could grieve them. And I felt very sad that they did not get to see the person that I became. And I thought, I felt sad for them too because they missed an opportunity to be better human beings, and they missed it. You know, I do believe in multiple lives. I don't think it doesn't make sense to me that we'd only be given one life and that would be it, make the most of it. Especially with kids, when children die. I just don't think that's fair. So I do believe we have more opportunities to grow and change and become better human beings. And I thought, what a waste of a life that they were so broken and flawed from their own stories that were bad, that they didn't have a chance to heal them and to make and to become better people. Because I believe everybody can be a better person. I don't believe anyone is hopeless. I really don't. But I was sad for them that they didn't take the opportunity that was given to them and become better people.
I appreciate you sharing that it took you about 10 years to forgive and grieve your mom and your dad after their loss because it sounds like that childhood was very tumultuous with a lot of things that caused anger. And that's something that I talk to a lot of people going through grief that struggle with anger. And I certainly was one of them, by the way. I could talk about anger for hours with people. And I think that's something I learned, on my own journey about anger is that it really was the part of us that loves us the most. The only problem is we don't pay attention to it as fully as we should. And so what oftentimes happens is we have all this anger built up for years, if not decades. And what that little thing was trying to say was is that this wasn't the right space for you, or this wasn't fair, or you should go another direction in life than you were taking. And almost in a lot of ways, anger for me now just represents a part of myself that was always standing up for myself and protecting me, but I never actually listened to it. And had I done that, I may have had a different trajectory in life. What are your thoughts on how anger's influence is as we go through a grief process?
I first of all, I think it's so important to feel your anger. If we don't feel our anger, it really poisons us. And I had another level to that, and I had a deep emotional and psychological pain because of the trauma. And that's where a lot of my anger was rooted, was in this pain that I felt so flawed and something seriously broken in me that my parents couldn't even feed me. I mean, isn't that a basic need that we should all be given? And, even today when I read some stories about how kids are so mistreated, and my heart just breaks because I know that feeling. But it leads to anger because on some level, we know this is not right. We're sentient beings. We're conscious beings. We have a basic understanding, I think intuitively, of what we deserve. There's somebody called, I hate using this word, but I'm going to. We have human entitlements. And I don't like the word entitlement because it's been so it's been taken apart by the world of narcissists. But entitlements as a human being, we're entitled to a happy and safe household. We're entitled to clean food and clean water. We're entitled to loving, caring relationships. Those are the gifts of being human beings. And I think when any of these things are threatened or kept from us, it builds anger. Because on some level, we know we deserve that. And what we do is we shut down our feeling of deservability because we're not getting things we know we're entitled to have. So we start to believe, well, maybe I wasn't deserving of that. And it's like, no, you are deserving. But it generates anger when you don't have the information to address some of these things that are going on in your life. So it builds anger. And that's what I started taking apart. I loved getting angry because it was a clue that there was something about to be discovered that I could say, okay, where else? For me, is when I was working with the stuff with my childhood, I could look at these things about, wait a minute, all kids deserve these things. But I felt this lack of deserving because of it. And it's like, no, no, no. And so I was angry about that. So now when I get angry, it's like, okay, where am I? What is this pointing me to? And honestly, even though mom and dad have been dead for a number of years, number of decades actually, there still is stuff that comes up around that. As I work through, more deep dive work that I'm doing around my love story, my money story, my health story, I look at what did I take from them that I'm still angry about? What did I get from them that I'm still angry about? So I look forward to my anger when it comes up.
That's how I feel about my anger when it comes up because it's always got a message of some kind to share with me. And I always tell people that go through grief because I'll hear people say, "Oh, I'm sorry for crying," or "I'm sorry I got so upset." And I go, "Stop apologizing for that. That's just, I don't want to hear that." And the reason I say that, by the way, is because that emotion's trying to communicate something to you, whatever it may be. And it's
Yes.
always a message. But when you try to suppress it all the time, it's going to come up with more force eventually. And sometimes if you don't give it space, it'll come out in the wrong way. And that means it could come out in a way that may hurt somebody else, may put you in a bad situation, things like that. It has a way of doing that if you don't listen to emotions. And so when you do give your
Absolutely.
space to your emotions to hear them and listen to them and not just say, "Oh, well, I'm angry." Well, what's causing you to be angry right now? And it can be, I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. I feel misunderstood. I feel like this is an injustice. Talk about that, really get through those situations. I had a place when I went through losing my kid that my in-laws, my mother-in-law is very narcissistic, very control freak kind of thing. I got super angry that year with all the things that came up. But what I realized after I lost my son is that that was the father side of me coming out. That was me saying, I'm in charge of my family now. I have actually a baby that's more important than me and my own selfish needs. And I have to be responsible for that. And that meant massive change in my life.
Yep.
And I remember sitting there saying, I can't tolerate and allow certain things. I just can't because I'm now responsible for a child. And that's just how it is. Uh,
Yep.
and so that anger, by the way, was communicating that to me, saying, hey, you're growing up, you're changing, you're learning, you're evolving, you're becoming a different person. My grandfather had this powerful saying over the years, never fully understood it till after all this stuff I've been through, but he said, you're never going to be the same person at 25 as you are at 30. You're never going to be the same person at 40 or 50 or 60 or 70. And he said, you shouldn't want to be the same person because if you are, that means you never grew. You never took chances in life. You never learned something.
Yeah,
And he
yeah,
said, and he said, life is very boring if that's the way you walk it. And so I've always kept that in mind as I've gotten older, and I'm only 38, so I still got lots of life left. But I'm just going to say, I took it to heart over the last 5 years, going through a lot of my own personal grief to say, yes, this did happen, and it didn't happen to me. It happened for me. And that's a hard place to get to for some people. And I get it. But I will say that when I got to that place of saying this grief all served a purpose in my life, and it's my job to do something with it or make something of it. And that's where, you listen to those emotions inside you because they are going to come
yes,
out.
yes,
Uh,
yes.
and when you listen to your emotions, by the way, the intensity comes way down because you're listening to yourself.
Uh, uh, dang, you're talking my tune.
That's what I've learned in my journey of things is just I see a lot of people walk around in grief or trauma or loss, and even in normal life coaching, I do, and I see so much anger all the time. And I love people that get angry. I love them because they're not scared to tell me how they feel or how they think or how they believe. They're not scared to do it. And that's what I celebrate those people. If you're going through grief and having a really crappy day, I love you for that. I love somebody else will tell you to fix it or change your attitude or something. Me, I just want to hold space for you, let you get it out because there's those messages in there you may not see, but I will. And so I'll be able to regurgitate them back to you and give you that platform to grow because that's really what this experience is about. I remember reading a powerful quote by, I don't remember if it's Marcus Aurelius, if I remember right. There's a quote he has, but he basically said, if you wanted to end your life, you can do so at any moment. And the whole point, by the way, wasn't to say you can just take the easy way out in life. What he was really talking about is that that option is always there and it will never go away. You can always choose to end your life if you want. But he said that's the easy way out. The point of this life, by the way, is to grow and learn and evolve and become the best that you can be as your person. And so the hard part of life is that journey. It is through grief. It's through that trauma. It's through that anger. It's through that situation you don't like. It's through those things that make us the person we are. And I've come to find I went to Tony Robbins EPW twice, and I found people there 60 to 80 years old, by the way. This is a phenomenal thing I learned from these guys. There were people that had lots of shame and regret because they didn't get to do certain things in their life, and they openly said, I just don't have time. And I have regret. I live with it. And what they took away from that is the same thing. They said, go live, go do. Even though you're going to experience these things, go live and go do because you'll get to my point and maybe you'll make my mistake and that time won't be there. That opportunity won't be there. And so then you end up having to live with that your whole life. And I had an 84-year-old lady share that with me at an event. And long story short, I took her advice. So,
Oh yeah. The greatest thing my stepson ever said to me was, I don't have any of my own children. I didn't have children, but I have a stepson now. And he got really frustrated with me and said, I don't understand how you live. You just do what you want. You keep going down your pathway. You don't follow any rules. And I said, that's the nicest thing you ever said to me. And he said, but don't you think
mm,
there's a way you should be doing things? And I said, no, no. And I said, dude, I have regrets. There's so many things that I wish I would have done. So many, you know, turns off the highway I wish I wouldn't have taken. I wish I would have kept going down this road. There's a part of me that wishes I would have followed the career path and got a master's and a PhD and became a physicist or something. And here I have a bachelor's in counseling psychology and a master's of fine arts in film production and writing, and I worked in the film industry. How do these things come together? I said, but that's what makes me cool and unusual. That's what makes me me. And all the regrets I have for the road I did not take, I carry them with me, but it makes me all that more willing to take chances that I may not have otherwise taken. And by the way, Chris, I'm probably old enough to be your mom. I'm not going to give you the exact number, but when people hear my age, they're like, "You've got to be kidding me." And I have had more vitality and energy and joy of living now than I ever had. And I have had my fair share of grief and challenge and trauma and so many things and emotions. And I wouldn't trade any of it for the world.
What are some of those things you learned along that grief journey in that 10-year period where you were working through a lot of anger and a lot of forgiveness with your mom and your dad? I know that it's hard when you grow up in a childhood environment like that, where you're, like you said, these innate things that we should have, just as simple as food and water and shelter and a decent family life. You know, when those things don't happen, and then you lose your parents, you know, you're working through so many of those situations. What were the biggest lessons that came out of that healing journey for you?
Well, the first one was persevere. It is so easy when you're going through this stuff to throw in the towel. I'll tell you what, at some one point, I felt like I was catatonic for a month in fetal position because I just could not get over some of the pain that was coming up. And I will admit to suicidal ideation. I thought, I hope, but I never was interested in taking my life. I just kept praying that I wouldn't wake up in the morning, that I would sleep and just never wake up again. Because the pain, and the pain came from, I felt like their deaths was the ultimate abandonment. They never really wanted me, and now you're just going to leave? Because I realized I had this little secret in the back of my mind that one day they would realize I was a cool person and they would love me and they would want me in their lives. And that's what I was angry about. I didn't get to show them that I was worthy of their love. And the truth is, it wasn't up to me to show them that. I had to really make peace with they were never going to get there. And that's when I started understanding who they were. And then I could forgive them. When I made peace and really remembered some of the stuff from my childhood, seeing how my mom was treated by her family and what my dad went through in his life and how in my book I call it our origin stories. I knew my origin story, but then I looked at their origin story. And my mother was one of 13 kids, and she was abused, probably sexually and physically. And she was, this was an immigrant farm community that they were living in, and the girls were not at all meant for anything but to have babies and to look after the men. So she had ambitions that were just beaten out of her. So she had her own flaws and problems that didn't afford her the space to be more of who she could be, and she ended up having severe mental problems that again I was angry about, that we had to take care of her because she had mental problems, and then she became such a narcissist that it was all about her, and she never cared about me. And why couldn't I get her to care about me? And it was a hard truth that sometimes they can't.
That's a
Sometimes
very
you
that's a
run
very
into
powerful
somebody,
perspective.
yeah, sometimes they aren't able to. They are really damaged and broken. And that's not to say I wouldn't have given my mom hope that if she ever got on the path of healing, she could have done something with it. But without the support or without the interest on her part, she just what really wasn't able to. So I've discovered this big wealth of compassion for her.
Uh,
And I still wish she would have gotten to know me.
well, you're a beautiful person, Carrie. No offense. And I love that I love that you've lived your life on your own course because that's what I encourage people to do. I've been asked so many times about this right and wrong way to do things in life, and I've told people I don't really subscribe to the ideology of right and wrong because for somebody that could be, going to school, getting married, get a job, have family. I mean, it could be that. Another person is they buy a sailboat and cruise the world by themselves. I mean,
Yep.
who's to say what's right and wrong for either person? Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I love that you brought up that you have compassion towards your mom because I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with. Glad you brought it up today. Is when we have somebody in our life that is just not capable of getting there. And those are going to be people that may not know how to show you love. They may not know how to communicate or express to you emotion in the right way or the way that you're seeking or wanting. And really
Yeah.
get into that place of realizing that, and I went through this dealing with a narcissist, they're just not capable of meeting you where you're going to be. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you can get to that place of resetting that expectation you have into they're just not capable, and that really has everything to do with that. The only thing I can really control is myself and what I can do. You tend to let go of that, and not in a let go, I don't care way, but a let go of acknowledgement and acceptance. And I think that's what can free a lot of people from that tumultuous relationship where people may not be able to give them what they're looking for.
And then here's another step, and I know you know this one. You got to forgive.
What
Forgiveness
what are
sets you free.
what are your thoughts on forgiveness, as far as self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others?
It's a daily practice of mine, and it is something that we take for granted. It's another one of these beautiful gifts, these entitlements of being human, because along with coming in as a human being, you are by definition flawed and will do make mistakes. Some of them absolutely stupid. Um, I dare anybody to tell me they've never made a stupid mistake. I've got pages of stupid mistakes I've made. And some of them are really quite humorous these days. But every day we've done something that we need to forgive ourselves for because otherwise we punish ourselves. We silently punish ourselves. And when we don't forgive those of us that left us too soon or those of us who have done us wrong and forgive ourselves for missing somebody like that. I had to forgive myself for loving my parents,
Yeah,
because they weren't real people, and and they didn't do well by me, but I still loved them.
that's a big statement. I love
Yep.
that, you
Yep.
know?
And even the other day, this we have a puppy who really is the owner of my heart. He is my heart hook, line, and sinker. And I was taking him for a walk the other night. And he's rambunctious. He's never known pain or sorrow. So he thinks every dog in the world wants to play with him. And we ran into a dog that he's met before. And it was a little bit darker. And he just bolted up to this dog. I couldn't pull him back fast enough. And the dog bit him.
Ooh.
And it shocked the hell out of him. And he was just like, whoa. And I I just felt horrible. I felt so horrible that I did something to hurt this being, this creature that really is my heart. And I had to go through a forgiveness process that, sometimes stuff happens and you can't prevent stuff. There's stuff, otherwise you go crazy. We have a coyote problem in the neighborhood, and my partner Simon drives me crazy. Don't let him out of your sight. Don't let him outside. And it got me all wound up. We got to get a Kevlar vest for him in case a coyote tries to grab him. And it's like, I don't know that I can live like that. That this poor dog has to be, watched day and night so nothing happens to him. And I'm still working through how that looks for me because I know I don't want to do anything that puts him in harm's way. But what's the balance between harm's way and doing the right thing? And in all of that, you make mistakes. You go too far in a direction, you make mistakes. Some of them all good intentions, but when you make a mistake, you got to forgive yourself. And if you can't forgive yourself for the action, you can forgive yourself for why you did it or why they did it to you.
That's such a powerful lesson with forgiveness because I think that at least when I was brought up in an environment where was heavily shamed and blamed and guilt tripped and all sorts of things. And this was a struggle I have recently in the last 3 years been working through in a lot of ways because I didn't realize how subconscious that was in myself. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's there faster than lightning.
Oh,
And so I've tried to explain to people on what I've learned about that is be compassionate towards yourself. Just like you said,
yes.
none of us are perfect. None of us
No.
are. My mother-in-law's favorite phrase, I used to laugh all the time because she would say things like practically perfect in every way. And I was going, I don't, no offense, none of us are. And, I always see people all the time that, make mistakes or do something. I do it all the time, by the way. I make mistakes all the time. And one of the books I read, Tim Grover, Relentless, he wrote this book. He's a basketball coach. And one of the things in his book that I picked up, which was really awesome, is one of the players showed up late for practice one day, like 2, 3 hours late for practice. And the guy came in saying, excuse, excuse, excuse. And he goes, I don't want to hear the excuse. What I want to hear is I screwed up. I made a mistake showing up late. I'm ready to work. And the guy said, well, why don't you care about an excuse or a reason? And he goes, because it doesn't matter. He said, the only thing that matters is you made a mistake. You want me to burn your chops over it for 2 hours or should we get to work? Um, and I
You
learned
know,
that powerful thing from that
here's
book.
here's exactly why. You want to know why that's important? You got to be accountable. And when you make excuses, you're you're pushing it off. I'm not accountable. I'm not accountable. I'm not responsible. And if you can't be accountable for your own actions, we can't trust you. We can't connect with you. Accountability and responsibility is vital to our abilities to grow and be great people.
I couldn't agree more.
That's why the guy did that. When you come in with all, the dog ate my homework, you're pretty much saying, I don't want to be close to you. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to show you who I am.
And
But
I
if you
think
come,
yeah,
yeah,
that's where we miss a lot of opportunities in life.
yes, 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 yes. It always freaks people out when I'm doing something and I mess up or it's like, ugh. And somebody said to me one time they were so afraid to call me because they knew I was going to have every excuse in the world, and yet they called me and I said, I have to apologize. I screwed up royally. And the phone got quiet and I said, are you there? And they said, I was prepared to battle you. And, because you always strike me as somebody who is very authoritative and you're not. And it's like, I said, so what have you learned about me today? And they said, you're pretty cool. You don't, it doesn't bother you to admit when you screwed up. Well, I don't like it. I don't like to screw up, but I do want to be the perfect person on the planet, but I keep trying and unfortunately I can't get there. What are you going to do?
I love that you said that to that person because that's where I feel, when we are going through grief, I always say be kind to ourselves. I know that's cliche to say, but you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna have an off day. You're gonna have a day where the emotions fly or whatever it is, or you're gonna have a day where you make a mistake, not getting somewhere on time or saying the wrong thing or not sending something right, whatever it may be. And giving yourself that permission to just say, I made a mistake and owning up for it and making right with it whatever way you can. I think there's so much power in that. For whatever reason, we're scared of that as a society. And I'd
Yeah, I
love to
don't know
see.
why.
I think, it's a trained, hardwired thing in us. And I think it comes from,
Yeah.
like I can say growing up, if I made a mistake, I never heard the end of it. And I was always treated in a way of blame, shame, and guilt. So when you live in blame, shame, or guilt about something you did, the only thing that's going to come out of that, by the way, is beating yourself up. And I'm going to be honest, there's plenty of people in the world that will do that for you. So just give it to them. They'll take care of that for you.
Yeah.
But just have some
Yep.
compassion for yourself and say, all right, I learned one way not to do it. So now here's a way to figure
Yeah,
out how to do it.
that's right.
So
That's really good. I like how you said that.
yeah. Well, my grandfather was one man who showed me compassion, one out of a few, and something he always taught me when we were putting crown molding up in his house. He has an old craftsman house. He's a woodworker, and he couldn't figure out the stupid trim angle one day. He was getting real frustrated. It's one of the few times I've heard my grandfather swear. And anyway, he figured it out one day, and the best part of it was it came in the form of trying to set up a saw, and he literally just goes, "You dummy." And he would say that to himself when he figured out something that was so easy, but he just missed it for hours, kind of thing. Then he goes, "Well, I guess I learned 10,000 ways not to do that, but now I know the right way." So,
Oh my God, that's pretty
so
good. That's pretty good. No,
Yeah. So
when you can laugh at your human foibles, then, but I know what you mean. Shame is another one of those powerful things. Shame is another one that sets us off. But with grief, I think I don't know. It's such important work. It's such important work to deal with grief. And there's and in all its many forms, and the forgiveness for whatever happened that led to the grief, even if it's a very positive thing. Forgive yourself for having to move because you're getting married, or forgive yourself for being scared because you're about to have a baby, and that grief and how that's going to change your life. Boy, oh boy, that's going to be a big one. But it's you'll never have that life back again. Never. You have that baby, you're good. You're
yeah.
in.
Well,
So I love that you have these conversations. This is great.
well, I like to have people come on this show because my biggest thing, I'll share with you since we're talking this direction is I couldn't figure out how to deal with losing my son for 2.5 years. I couldn't
Mm,
figure it out. I was stuck in a very down, depressed, like, why did this have to happen? And my life's going to whatever direction. And then I got to thinking one day and I said, what if I celebrate him every day? What if I create something beautiful for other people? And when I stumbled upon the fact that we don't talk about grief in a very positive light and we don't actually talk about it as an empowerment tool, but this thing that happened for or to us, and everybody just tells us to get over it and move on. I sat there and said, well, that's a crock of whatever. Like, and after talking to 100 people, I just started realizing that, I created this space for people to come on and talk about their grief journeys and their healing journeys and to share with people what they learned because I came to find that grief has no 12-step program. You can't go read a book off the shelf and say, I got it all figured out. I'm good to go. It just doesn't exist that way. But what does exist, by the way, is the power of our stories, the power of our experiences. And when we resonate and connect with people, and I don't care what your background is, where you came from, what your walk of life, it doesn't matter to me. What does matter, by the way, is you have a story, and inside that story is a very powerful gift that you have. And you may not see it right away, it might be a year out, 5 years out, whatever it is. But you're going to run into somebody in life who needs to hear that. You're going to run into somebody like being on this podcast. Somebody's going to listen to Carrie's story and say, that makes sense. I had a rough childhood too. How did she navigate that thing? Or, wow, her mindset's X. I wish I could get there. Or, you know what? I think I can. It's
mm-hmm.
that thing right there is how we help people. And that's why you don't need to be perfect, and none of us are. But you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You don't have some problem. That's all BS you've been told. You have an experience of life. You have a
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
And
And
so
you,
why not share it?
yeah, and you, all these experiences, not just your stories, but every experience, every emotional experience that you were talking about earlier has a gift. Grief is loaded with gifts.
It truly is.
Grab them.
So I love that, Carrie. That's a great way to wrap up this podcast. Take your gifts that you guys have. You all have them. I share with everybody too. I might be a coach and I might be have my own podcast and writing a book. I don't have all the answers, but I find them through the conversations we have here on this podcast. And that, my friends, that is the power of life. It's what we do collectively and collaboratively that moves ourselves forward and ultimately creates a new, better version of us when we step into who we're becoming.
Yep,
So.
yep.
So,
Uh,
Carrie, as we wrap up the podcast, I wanted to ask you about your book. When did you write Life Rewritten, and what motivated you to write that?
Life Rewritten, the original title was called Memoir of an Ordinary Person. And my one of my editors, I worked with three different editors. One of them said, A, you're not ordinary, and B, nobody wants to know how an ordinary person lives. We're all ordinary. That's not going to get anybody interested. So I struggled with the title. And as I was struggling with the title, I just kept writing and writing. And I realized that the key moment of my book was about how when I was in film school, I had already been on my healing journey because it was about 10 years after my parents died. So I was already on my healing journey. And then in the middle of um, one of my class projects where we were all sitting around the table, we're talking about how you have characters and you have themes and you have plots and you have journeys and you have challenges and conflicts and how you take the hero on this journey. And as I was sitting there, I went, oh God, my life is a story. I have antagonists, I have protagonists, I have these themes, I have these plots, I have these twists and turns, I have these challenges that are supposed to direct me on a path to a brighter future. And so I also realized that every day on a movie set or a television set, they start the day with, where are today's rewrites? Because every day, even if you have a fully fleshed out script, you could be in the middle of the show or middle of filming and somebody say, well, why wouldn't my character say that? You know, you got to change that dialogue or you got to change that motion. So you have rewrites every day. And so I thought, huh, life rewritten. Every day I was rewriting. In the morning I thought, okay, what are today's rewrites? Just like I was on my movie set again. Yeah, what are today's rewrites? And it just, it took me a little bit of time to finally go, duh, life rewritten. Derp. There it was right in front of me the whole time. And so that's how it came to be. And the book is in three parts. Each chapter starts off with a story from my life, and then a description of the story element that you see in that story, and then the chance to look at it and apply that to your life. And so it's been very well received. I'm very happy to say. And so, but it's also led to the rewritten series where now I'm going deeper into specific areas like money rewritten, love rewritten, age rewritten, health rewritten, parenting rewritten. And I may even collaborate with you on one called grief rewritten. So, we've been
Mm.
given messages about what we're supposed to do in each of these areas of our life. And I don't buy them. Not anymore. Not anymore.
Well, Carrie, I'd love to take you up on that if we find that path in the future. I think we could make something real beautiful.
It would be fun. Let's you wouldn't believe some of the looks I get from from people in my classes or my clients when I start talking about just a little shift in perspective. What if you looked at it that way? Oh, hadn't thought about that. Because again, we get so focused. I say let's open up that blinder over there. Oh!
I love that. Well, Carrie, where can we find your book, by the way, if we want to purchase it?
You can go to my website, carriecasey.com, and it's CarrieKCWEST.com.
Perfect. And
You can
then
also
I'll add
get it on
that.
Amazon, but you can get it from me too. My website has a bunch of other stuff that's good content and downloads and things that you can take away from it. So
Well, I'll make sure to put your website in the show notes for listeners if they decide to go check that out. And I highly recommend that they do because you're a phenomenal person that I've met along my podcast journey. And I'm looking forward to future conversations. This has been very eye-opening today.
me too. Me too. This has been fun. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love the conversation. I love your questions. I love your humanity.
Well, thank you. It's what the world needs today is more of us to just be ourselves, be human. Like what you told your stepson that you have now is, yes, I'm not ordinary. I'm very different, and I think that's a beautiful thing to celebrate. And that you may not have taken the traditional path, as everybody says, but you know what? The untraditional, unforged path always gives us the rewards we need, and it puts us on the path where we're supposed to go. So.
Yep.
Carrie, when I usually wrap up the podcast, I ask my guests a couple questions. One of them is, if you run into somebody going through grief or feel stuck in grief, what's one thing you would share with them to help them navigate that journey just a little easier?
First of all, I would tell them that no matter what, they are loved. No matter how upset they feel, how terrible they feel, however or whatever, or numb, they're not feeling anything. I would remind them that no matter what, they are loved and that this is the worst, crappiest time of their lives and they are loved.
That's a beautiful message because I think at the end of the day, we're all loved. And I think sometimes we forget that. And it's
Hmm.
something that is On a humanity level of things, we all deserve love and compassion and kindness towards one another. And
Yep.
when we get out of the rat race, we find out really quickly that we're able to give that as much as receive it. So I
Yep.
appreciate you sharing that.
Yep.
Um, if people want to connect with you after listening to this episode, where can they find you?
My website, you can get a call with me. Just click on to the link to set contact me, and you can set up some time to talk with me directly, or you can send me an email, carrie@carriecaseywest.com. I, some people said to me, "Oh, you shouldn't do that." I was like, "Why not? You want to I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, Carrie, Carrie @carriecaseywest.com."
Perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and have your email and your website in the show notes. So for listeners
Hmm.
listening today, check out the show notes when we get done with listening to the episode. You'll find a way to contact Carrie. Like I said, go check her out. She's a phenomenal human being. And as you guys have noticed today, she went from going through a very tumultuous childhood with trauma and has become this beautiful life coach that helps people open up their eyes and take the blinders off and see what's really out there and available to them. So, Carrie, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today's episode and sharing your insights and wisdom you've learned along your journey.
I am thrilled to have been here. Getting to know you even more, it confirms what I first thought about you and that you're a cool guy. And I'm glad I know you.
Well, thank you, Carrie. I feel the same about you, and I'm definitely sure we're going to be collaborating here in the future on some projects.
Yes,
So, well, I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Carrie and I today on this episode of the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Carrie's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empoweredgriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. The Empowered Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.